Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I am delighted to be joined by two wonderful people I've had the honour of working with for many years now. Sam Trattles, negotiation expert, CEO of The Power to Ask, and Nick Arcaro. You have been with Laing O'Rourke for many years and are now the Human Performance and Wellbeing Leader and recently awarded, well, let's just say you have individually, but at least recently achieved Laing O'Rourke's fourth WGEA Employer of Choice citation. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is great to have you both here, and I know that you're going to bring two very different perspectives, and probably similar as well, but two different lenses to an important conversation that we want to have around pay progression and fairness and what it means to ask for something that you know you probably deserve and how to receive that ask and what we do about it. It's a conversation that we've been talking about for some time now. It started at the beginning in the year of the year when the world felt like a slightly different place. We've had March and the festival that March is, the celebration of inclusion and diversity that comes our way. And I'm sure we've all attended lots of events where we've heard discussions about empowerment and standing up and equality. And they are definitely concepts that I know the three of us and many people who are listening to us are very passionate about, but we really can't have this conversation in a vacuum. So right now, as we discuss this, we're sitting in a place where the world probably feels a lot more changeable, challenging, complicated, and the pathway forward is unclear. So we're sitting in a time of potential financial crisis, community, issues, community crisis, and a lot of personal stress that's building up. So, people listening are probably thinking, I do deserve pay and progression still in 2026. I've been working my butt off and I deserve this, but then the world feels like a risky place to start raising our head and asking about these issues. So, just a small little simple topic that we've set for ourselves today. Um, I'm going to ask both of you to tell us a little bit more about yourself, and the wisdom that you bring to this conversation. So, ladies first, Sam, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I'm Sam Trattles. I work with business leaders who are challenged by the fact that they know what they want but aren't sure how to overcome the hurdle of asking for it without feeling awkward, being difficult, or being seen as being pushy. So people come to me when they are nervous about a big conversation, when they are unsure, or when they're really tired and want help on how do I learn how to negotiate in ways that work for them. So I have the privilege of working with all different types of business leaders. I had a lovely corporate career for 20 years across Australia and South America and Europe, and so have lots of diverse background in that world. But also when I left the corporate space, I was like, well, there's actually no methodology for Australians, and we're different to British people and we're different to Americans. So I set about creating that, which is the power to ask, and so unpacking a way that people can step through a process, because that's what it is, and it's not some secret thing that only people are good at, certain people are good at. It's actually something that we can all become more comfortable with, because it fosters the opportunity to have these important conversations without being weird. So that's my little space.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks, Katrina, for that lovely introduction before. Nick Arcaro, I work at Laing O'Rourke. Been with them for approximately 9 years, but across the construction industry in some different spaces for coming up to 17 years. And really a lot of that's been in around health and safety, risk management, and in previous 3 years, I spent a fair bit of time at Laing O'Rourke in their diversity and wellbeing space, and that's really where I'd probably had the opportunity to engage in a lot of different spaces, particularly in the gender equality area. And we're seeing lots of that success come through, and have done over the years, particularly with our fourth consecutive WGEA Employer of Choice for Gender Equality citation, which is great, and lots of opportunity for our people over the next 3 years to really engage in that opportunity, and really sort of test and stretch with new citation requirements how we are embedding those principles and that work and delivering that in a real world context. So it's not just about sort of the plan and the strategy and the program and all these wonderful words on a page. It's really about bringing it to life, and working with so many different people in and around that space, from leadership engagement all the way through to our supply chain partners, clients and external parties that really contribute to how that comes to life. So it's been quite an interesting journey. It continues to, as it should, change in the right way, and it's definitely evolved, but we still have a long way to go, not just at Laing O'Rourke, but across all sort of sectors and spaces that work in and around Australia, in different environments. So hopefully we'll be able to flesh through some of that today.
I'm sure we will. I'm so glad you both do the work you do. The world definitely needs you. The work you do, Sam, at an individual level is incredible, just really helping people to find their voice around these topics. And Nick, you really create workplaces that live and breathe everything that we talk about, and aspire to in this area. As we said in the setup, the world's quite a complicated and probably scary place for many people. What does it feel like to you at the moment? What are you hearing and seeing? Nick? I'd say,
It was quite interesting. Sam and I were talking about this just before. In the construction industry, I think you could almost say that this is one of those moments in time which the industry is shifting. We've gone through, in Australia, spaces around lots of regional work to support oil and gas and construction activities in those spaces, into more road rail industry development, shifting into different states and territories, and now kind of the shift is happening again. I'm located on Naarm, Wurundjeri, as the custodians here, in Melbourne, and we are really seeing a big shift away from big infrastructure work through lots of the big build that's changing, or finishing up really, in Victoria. And we've seen that across WA as well, and some real sort of push into those Queensland and New South Wales opportunities, and then sort of still looking at AUKUS around Northern Territory, South Australia and WA. I think that you could fall into the trap by saying that's kind of normal and natural, and those things are pivoting and shifting. And whilst that's true to some extent, there's also these broader global and Australian systemic challenges around how work is done, and what's coming, and the impacts that people are feeling. So I think it's, from an industry perspective, there's some uncertainty and some worry from people that are in the construction industry. And then you kind of add to that the broader economic challenges that people are facing in Australia, and also the broader political challenges around the world that are also impacting people, particularly when we consider how multicultural and diverse Australia really is. That we're not isolated here in Australia, and that we can't just think about Australia and Australian culture. There's such a mix and a flow between different influences from around the world that really impact people at a very granular individual level.
And Nick, do you think it's normal? Do you think this is something that's happening? It's kind of a normal ebb and flow, or is this unique to 2026? Like, in your career, has there been, flexing like this,
I feel like there's been parts of it are quite natural and normal in terms of industry flexing and shifting and pivoting and changing its priorities, but it feels like it really has been drawn out longer than it needed to have been, and that we're seeing movement at a much slower rate of change because of those external factors that are really impacting decision making at industry, organisation and individual levels. It's also, it sounds a bit buzzwordy, but it's also a post-COVID world, and I don't think anybody fully understands what that really means yet. I think we continue to learn that as a society, as globally, but what does that really mean? And I think also from my experiences with people, what does it mean for them? Even at an individual level, people are really challenging and questioning, what does that mean for me in this world at the moment? How are you finding it, Sam? I mean, I'm talking very much in a construction industry context, but how do you find it working across different industries that you support?
Yeah, I think that there's a level of fear. Like, I think you really have to look at from a global level. It's terrifying right now for most people, as it should be. And unfortunately, what that does is we tend to shut down because it's overwhelming, and so then you have to go, well, how do I affect the cul-de-sac that I live in and build it up from the bottom up, so that we don't get stuck in this frozen space. And I think that's one of the things I'm trying to talk to clients about at the moment, is say, hey, what can you affect? Because we do need to keep moving, even though it is terrifying. That doesn't stop. So I sound like a politician, doesn't stop progress. I think it's more, I have to keep going, otherwise I am not going to impact anything. And that's probably the worst thing. So if I look at, as you're talking about there around the states, it's interesting which states in Australia are growing versus which ones are struggling as a result of the last 10 years of what's gone on. And then when we start to talk about governments talking about, okay, well, you're going to be forced to do blah, 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 whether that's, work from home or whatnot. As soon as you start to say that, people start to go, hang on, I'm going to be forced to do something again. And that didn't go so well at any level. I think it's really interesting, Kat, you've probably got a better view on this. In the global context, the countries that didn't force lockdowns or force things, what's the impact on people's mindset and perspective right now, and how is that helping or hindering workplaces and individuals?
I think the countries that I'm familiar with that didn't force people to stay at home, so particularly the Nordic countries, I think the current situation, if we're talking sort of at a world view, they've got quite different pressures going on. I mean, they've got borders with quite large, scary powers in the world. So I think they're sort of more troubled by some of those geopolitical issues at the moment than necessarily discussions about having to work from home. Plus, and this is really getting into the nitty gritty of it, plus those countries are very advanced in renewables. They're not reliant on fuel like we are. So they're having a very different experience. So, but I like your point that you both made earlier about, is this cyclical or is this a one-off incident? I think we tend to always think that these are one-off incidents. Like, we thought COVID was a massive unprecedented crisis, and we all use that word unprecedented, but and this is probably showing my age, but I remember working in financial services when the GFC happened, and we thought that was unprecedented, and we thought that was going to be an absolute cataclysmic moment that shatters everything, and certainly did shatter a lot of individual lives without a doubt. But the industry bounced back, and I'm pretty sure that the shareholder reports of most financial services organizations show that they're still pretty robust. But it was a time of great workplace fear and individual fear, and a very individual, what does this mean for me? And I think that's what we're all tapping into in this conversation, is going, you've got humans at work, and their work supports, funds, enables the other parts of their, home life, whether that's them living on their own, or they've got families or dependents and whatever other responsibilities. And it's that interplay between your workplace and your broader health and well-being. And where are we sitting right now? And, as prices go up for individuals, they need to be able to go and talk about pay at work. It goes hand in hand, but yet then we've got this tension where the financial situation means that there might be constraints in the workplace. So we've already seen in the news plenty of tech companies and financial services companies doing, percentage cuts to their workforce. So then you go, am I going to stick my head above the parapet today and ask for something when this workplace may start making changes?
And picking up on something there, it's an interesting time to choose who you want to be as a leader. So, culturally, and there's the real risk, I think, between what Australia was based on in our constitution versus other countries. And I did so much in my rabbit warren for this for COVID. It's like, why is it so different in different countries? And, we are predicated on I'm okay when everybody's okay philosophy. And that's fracturing at the moment. And I think we need to think about, before I say no to everything and just look after myself, what are we doing? Where's our mateship? Where's our teamwork? How do I want to be remembered
Mm,
through this period? Because it's everybody's doing it tough.
mm,
So I think it's really important for people to think about, well, what's that going to look like in 6 months, 6 years' time, from me, and how I wake up in the morning and feel proud about the way that I've behaved.
mm. And this is where I think your role is so fascinating, Nick. You know, it's a human performance and well-being, and I love the juxtaposition of performance and well-being. And I think that taps into exactly like what Sam was saying. The challenge is like, how can we do both? How can we feel as though we're still well in the fullness of the sense of the word, and yet the show goes on in the workplace and we still perform and there's still productivity and there's still capability build, but we feel safe and healthy and respected, that they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and to that point, it's almost I haven't quite found the right grammatical connection point, but and doesn't feel right because
Mm,
they're not independent. You know, we see time and time again that when we have not just from a well-being, you know, I think a traditional well-being view of individuals and the workplace, but you know, when we have greater holistic well-being, it's not always going to be perfect or not always going to be right for everybody at a particular period of time, but when we focus in and around well-being, positive outcomes for individuals, there comes the performance. The performance doesn't come from you know, getting more done in a day or squeezing more into your
mm,
diary or being able to tick a big list off. Actually, it's more about your well-being, and when we're harnessing more of that, that's actually the amplifying of how we get performance, better performance from people. Not
mm,
necessarily more work, but better performance out of people, and people have better performance in the workplace and at home. And
mm,
it's quite interesting. I know our topic in and around this conversation is around pay, but you know, those conversations around well-being from a pay perspective, well-being from a quality of life through pay perspective, well-being from a reward and recognition through pay perspective. You know, all of these elements come in and around. They are connected still to our well-being, and that in
mm,
turn is connected to our performance. The tricky part is that um, you know, it's on a fine line here where more money doesn't necessarily mean better performance or mean you know, you're actually being rewarded or recognised for the work that you're doing, or that you're going to feel good about coming to work. So I think there's
mm,
some real deeper conversations, and I know we'll probably talk about this soon, around transparency and those challenges with leadership conversations around pay and pay equity, and that I think really come into play when we talk about
mm,
well-being, but also not, you know, wholeheartedly about the only outcome in terms of people's performance.
mm. Well, let's put this to the test. So what we want to do is kind of look at this exact situation from a couple of different perspectives, because we know that, you know, people out there, they might be the person wanting to talk about it, they might be the employee, they might be the manager, they might even be the next level up manager who's looking at this from an org perspective. So let's start with a situation that I think every leader is going to recognize. You've got that person, that high performer, they work really hard, they perform really well in the productive sense, as you were saying, Nick. You know, they go above and beyond, and they're probably starting to feel a little bit, you know, overlooked and wondering, you know, it's my time now. And they're going to come to the manager and open up a conversation because this is how they're feeling. Um, if you're that employee and you're feeling like that today in the context that we just, you know, mentioned, where do you even begin to figure out what to do? Like, how do you know if it's the time to ask for something? And I know, Sam, this is, you know, you are the queen of the power of asking. What do you do if you're that person who's feeling a bit grizzly and grumpy because they're working their butt off and it's time to say something, but is it time to say something? Where do you begin?
Yeah, 100%. The time to say something is every day. And because if we are tired and grumpy, then that's where we've actually left it a little bit too far. So the earlier we can have conversations about where you want to be, the better it is. Because now, once it's shared, it's aired, and then we can do something about it. So I think, having these conversations, not waiting to review time, not waiting to the point where it's like, righto, it's either this or I'm out of here, or quietly quitting it, or any of those terrible things. Because we don't want good people to go, and we can't do anything if we don't know. So, sitting down and saying, right, okay, I'm feeling a bit, I'm feeling like maybe my time in this role or in this team or in this blah, blah, blah is I'm outgrowing it. And so can we start the conversation? I think that's the very first thing you need to be doing, and then working it out from there as to, well, what do I want? First of all, I need to just say I want something more or different, or it doesn't have to be bigger. It's just a shift. So, my own business, 2 years ago, I was like, no, I'm over it. I don't know what I want to do. And so a great mentor of mine said, well, you need to get a new job. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't really want to work for somebody else. He goes, no, get yourself a new job in your own business. So just airing it made a huge difference. So I think that for me, that's the starting point.
Why do you both think that people don't generally speak up in the first instance? Like, what are they worried of? Is it fear? Is it not having the skills? What is it? Why don't people speak up more often?
I find that, from my perspective, that sometimes there's an element of fear. Broader sort of concepts around feeling psychologically safe, or feeling like they're going to be heard, or that there's going to be an outcome, and maybe sometimes making assumptions about whether an outcome will be achieved or not. I think, from my experience talking with a number of people, not just in my own teams, but sometimes it's actually an acknowledgement around they don't know what they want. To your point, Sam, it was I'm going to ask for more money because I'm working hard, but actually, do I really need more money, or do I really want more money? No, what I really want is more flexibility, or more time off, or I'm bored with the work that I'm doing, or I want, to move laterally, horizontally instead of vertically, or I want to experience a different sector or an industry, or a different team or an environment. So I think part of it is also people holding themselves back, whether that's intentional or not, because they're not quite sure what they want to ask for. And I think even in that example, that's still an okay conversation to have. I'm feeling this way, to your point, Sam, air it. I'm feeling this way. I still don't know what I want, or I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Can you help me figure it out? As opposed to feeling like people have to have all the answers and the solutions before they, this is one of those opportunities where, you can go to a leader with a problem and your line manager with a problem without having the solution, because it's something that you're trying to work with yourself or with your own team. I think that for me, there's sort of some of the experiences that I've had.
Yeah, and I think that, it's very polite. Australians generally are rule followers, so we like to know that that's the time when I have that conversation because that's what I was told. So, as we get more senior, we still follow those rules, and so that it's very kind and thoughtful. I think oftentimes the flip to that is they think it will be a fight, they think it will be an argument, and it's like, I implore people to think about how many times has it actually been an argument. And I know there's certain industries where people are gruff and it does come across as that, but I think for the bulk of these conversations, it is not an argument. And the last thing is, I think most people know what they want, and I think where you look for knowing that is, I call it wine bar wisdom. But where are you already having these conversations? And Kat, I know you've done some research on this, and who are you telling when you should be telling somebody else?
Exactly. We do have the answer to that. So we recently ran some research around who do particularly the research was focused on working women, but the question was, who do you talk to about your aspirations and about your workplace challenges? And the number one response, virtually 50% of women said their friends. It is literally wine bar wisdom. It's Saturday night and you start telling your bestie that, oh my God, no one knows how good I am. They're not paying any attention. I'm working so hard and I'm getting nothing for it. That's the Saturday night conversation. And then the second category was family. So we tell besties, then we tell family, and the third was manager. That was only about 36% of women actually told their manager what they really want. What was very concerning also was that most people were finding that they felt invisible in the workplace. So to your point, Nick, I think you've got that person, it's rumbling around in their head. People do not lack capability, but they feel like they lack the visibility in the workplace. I'm not seen, I'm not heard. People don't know what's going on. I get in here, I do my thing, I leave. And it's that invisibility that starts then erode connection, engagement, performance, well-being, and you can sort of see the spiral from there.
It's interesting that research, I think from a gender perspective, with a gendered lens, when you think about it from a new job opportunity,
Mm,
absolutely statistics have shown us time and time again that women will often start at a lower pay rate or
mm,
in a lower space in a pay grade banding than what men do, because women will not be as forward or as blunt about their expectations of what they want to and should be earning. And so we
yeah.
know that men ask for more, push for more at those early stages, and so we
Mm,
start these challenges prior to women and men entering industries. Um,
mm,
so interesting that in the same way it's playing out in terms of how they're taught having those conversations.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sam, just before we move on, I'm interested, is your client base who come and do work with you, are they predominantly women or do you have a equal gender representation?
It's a good question. We do work with anybody who's wanting to learn this skill, but yes, it is
Mm,
predominantly women, and the
mm,
great works as well. So yeah, I do think it's
mm,
interesting picking up on that point around pushing higher. So we always say to people, there's three. When you're doing your preparation for these conversations, what's the three levels? So knowing your dream outcome, your ideal outcome, and most importantly, your walk away. And the dream outcome should scare the shit out of you, to say it out
mm,
loud, so that you've got something to fall back to. So really go for it. If you thought, and I challenge people who are listening to this, if you thought they were going to say yes to whatever you asked for, what would you ask for? I had a
mm,
staff member, I had two jobs going. I had someone come for the more senior role, and I said to her, look, I don't think you're ready for this job yet. I think the other one's good for you. I said, but first tell me what your salary expectations was, and I'll just pick a number. And she said, oh, look, I'd really like 95, but I'll take 70. And I was like, I'm sorry,
wow.
what was that? Anyway, so I said to her, look, we're going to have this conversation again, and when you say what you want, you don't say anything else. You just say what you want. Anyway, she said, okay, well, I'd really like 85. I was like, I'm sorry, what did you just said a whole different
Yeah.
number. And so, I said to her, okay, I'm going to tell you a number and you're going to tell that back to me now. And I never did this, but it was really frustrating to watch. Because for me, everyone in my team, they whatever level they got paid the same. So I said, you can all talk, it's all fine, and legally now that's okay as well. But yeah, just that whole, don't pick a number just out of random. Do the research to
Mm,
know, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to ask for this one that really, and it's not money. Money's not everything, I want X number of dollars and I want this much leave and I want to have this much flexibility and I want to work on these clients or these projects. What are all the other things? Because cash is not always king and not always possible. So trying to be a bit more creative in what is important to the makeup of your remuneration package as well.
I think also, just to add to that, Sam, there's probably some, sometimes uncomfortable conversations where
mm,
I'll often say to people, you also need to think about the expectations around those salary outcomes,
mm,
because there are reasons why people are earning more money than others. Well, hopefully never in the same role, but there are reasons why there are job grades, different salary bandings, different titles, because the expectation of experience, outcome, commitment, sometimes hours of work, it can vary significantly. So I think there also needs to be, and sometimes I feel like that's a little missed, a really honest reflection around what am I being asked to do in this role as well, and am I prepared to do that? Because if that's challenging, kind of to your point, Sam, those expectations around not just salary outcomes, but flexibility, time, opportunity to do other philanthropy, non-profit work, whatever that might be, like whatever your desires are in terms of the work that you're doing, you need to think about that more broadly in terms of the expectations as well.
So let's flip this to the other side of the table because we've started to lean into the manager's perspective. So in this scenario, let's just say now you are the manager, you know that person's really good, you value them, you don't want to lose them out of your team, but you also know that broader contextual piece that both what you mentioned, Nick, what other people are getting and why. You also might know the organisational context, which sits within the world dynamic we're talking about. So things are getting a little bit tighter. Where do you begin as the manager when this person comes, sits down in front of you and says, here's my number, here's what I want, or don't know what I want? Where do you begin?
Go first, Sam, if you like.
Huh? Well, I think that it is, first of all, it shouldn't be at that point. If you really are a people manager, that's one of your primary roles.
Exactly.
So making sure that you're starting that conversation with, look, I can see that you're starting to, outgrow this role, or feeling like there's signs. I think, I found quietly quitting such an interesting term because people were like, oh, it's a surprise. I'm like, I never had anybody in my team that I was surprised that they weren't happy. And so I think that's, being really on it with your people and starting that conversation. Like I remember one year so I was, head of sponsorship for Telstra. So we had a lot of options in terms of the portfolio. So every year I would say, right, let's throw the whole portfolio in the air and see who catches what. And if, and sometimes we would just push something onto some other guy who looked after the football stuff. Anyway, so we pushed something else onto him and he was like, I think I'd leave if you took that away from me. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So, then there was a negotiation around the portfolio and somebody else wanting it and these types of things. So I think being very much aware of where they're coming from, and then, and what can you do? Because you can't always get what they need. And so then that then leads to, okay, well, what can I do to keep you? That's other things. Or what can I do to help you go and find something else that is better for you? And that is really hard when that person is such a key part of your team. But, you never know where they might end up coming back to you somewhere else down the road. But I've always been of the belief that, okay, if this is not the right place for you, then thank you so much for everything you've done. Now let's find you where you need to be.
I love that. I love that one lens around talking about the opportunities that could exist within a particular team or organisation, and exploring all those things, not just salary. We talked about that earlier about kind of what really are people looking for. And also that point about sometimes there just isn't the opportunity there within the organisation. And that's okay too. I think that's probably one of my biggest key takeaways, Kat, working with yourself and the Cultivate team over the number of years that we have at Laing O'Rourke. Sponsorship isn't about sponsorship within the organisation only. It's about the individual relationship and sponsorship. And actually, that sponsorship might lead to what are some opportunities that I can still, with my organisation industry experience, or as a line manager or leader, still in a sponsorship mentoring capacity, two different things, but still in those capacities. How can I support you to grow, accelerate, and then come back to us, and then come back to this team where there might be an opportunity in 2, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be, or even if not, how do I still support you in terms of your opportunity? And that's okay too. And they're those uncomfortable conversations sometimes, I think, both line manager and employee sometimes might know the potential outcomes, but not quite willing to have those conversations. But that's okay. I think, that builds into your point, Sam, about hopefully that's not the point by the time someone's ready to go that you're having these conversations. It could be that you've been working with somebody for a number of years in your team, and as a leader, you're actually recognising and acknowledging their experience, their skill set, their opportunity, and maybe that opportunity isn't within your organisation, maybe it's somewhere else.
And I don't think we talk about healthy churn. With 5 generations in the workplace, there's lots of different beliefs on what is loyalty and what is a healthy rate of churn, and everybody feels like, we want to keep everybody, but it's kind of like, well, hang on, we don't have to keep everybody, and the pace at which our workplaces are changing so quickly right now, it's not going to look like that I don't think it's going to look like that in 5 years, let alone 3. So yeah, there's a mentality shift we need to have. About what does next gen see as their career progression, and I loved what you said there, Nick, about letting them go and then come back, because that's such an awesome. When you go and work in a place where people have gone and come back, it's a great culture because they went and tried something else and then came and went. Actually, you know what? That's a very cool place.
And what an opportunity for everybody, right? To have a different experience. Whatever that experience might be, but to have a different experience, bring that diversity of experience back into an organisation, and that helps kind of make sure that it's not stale and it challenges the status quo and it brings some different thinking in. It could also solidify, hopefully, everybody hopes that they're working in a great organisation, solidify kind of the culture and the environment that they've worked in for years, and that's the one that they want to come back to.
Yeah. There's a maturity in the dialogue that you've both mentioned that goes beyond that I've got an ask and there's a yes no answer, and it's very sort of vanilla and procedural and systemic. There's a much deeper conversation you've both mentioned which goes into values, strengths, goals, aspirations. As you said, Nick, it's more I'm going to support and sponsor you, actively advocate, not just give you a yes no, I'm going to tick this box. Where do you think managers normally go wrong in this conversation? Is it they want to be liked and they want to be supportive and say the right thing? Because you've been quite brave in the advice that you've given the person. Like, where do managers go wrong when they do faff it in that conversation?
I mean, I think Sam and I both smiled at the exact same time when
Yeah.
you posed that. So I think absolutely. Look, even myself, everybody would love to be liked and thought that they're the greatest leader in the world, and that they've got such great leadership styles, and that's okay. That's something I think to work towards and try and work on.
And there's Santa Claus with a bag full of money to give all the kids
right.
when
Absolutely.
they want to. Yeah.
But
How
I
much
think
do you want?
That sort of definition around what it means to be liked, or the understanding about what it means to be liked, isn't necessarily because you're giving everybody whatever they want all the time. It's actually maybe being liked is the wrong word. I hope to be a leader that is respected. I may not be liked all the time, but people will respect kind of views, values, intent, the desire to support others. Never always going to give somebody the right outcome that they're looking for. So I think there's some hesitation around that. I also don't think it's very easy for me to say that, but we put a lot of pressure on leaders to be certain people, perform in particular ways, align or challenge their own values and principles with business sort of tension, and so I don't say that lightly. I think it's a tough job to be a leader, and we won't always get it right. But I do think that sort of what will others think of me is definitely something that plays into decision making or lack thereof.
And I think that people who come to me and say, oh, well, we sort of like the idea of negotiation training, but we don't like it because everybody's probably going to ask for a pay rise. And I'm like, okay, well, actually, they're going to communicate much better, first of all, and deal with lots of other things. But the most important piece there is actually there's no pay rise unless something's changed. So as an individual leader, my first thought when you come to me and say, oh, I'd kind of like a pay rise, you're like, oh, shit, I was going to ask this year. And it's like, everybody can have a pay rise if everybody deserves one. You know, the first thing is get your job description and then work out what you're doing now versus your JD. If there is a change in responsibility, budgets, whatever, blah, 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 there has to be a conversation if it's a significant shift. So you asking for one should not make me freeze and think about my own. That is a fundamental problem, because yes, we know that there's bell curves and we know that there's only a certain pool of money and blah, 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 but they're all business case related. And so we need to be realistic about what does it mean for everybody to ask. It means that I know where everybody's up to, and then we can build a plan that gets you there in time. I can't do anything this week. We just slashed this many jobs. We lost this, blah, blah, blah. So the reality of where we are right now is X. And so where do we want to get to? We only just started this conversation, and that's why I said in the beginning, every day is a good day to start this conversation, because from the first conversation to when we get to there is time and lots of conversations. You know, average pay rise takes at least 12 weeks. So it's not just one conversation. And so then when you're starting to talk about a significant shift, then we need to have, you know, a plan to get there over time, and things need to flex and change in the business. So yeah, sort of taking a bit of a step back and going, hold on, how did I hear that versus how did I feel it?
There's a real coaching element in both what you've both talked about, and I think often what I've seen where it goes wrong is where managers do the almost good cop bad cop routine. They go, I think you're great, I fully agree, I'm going to go and ask, and then they come back and go, yeah, those people up there said no, but I still think you're great, and they blame the system, but they don't get into the detail of what you both talked about, like the rigor of understanding maybe the sort of the bigger, financial piece, the broader equity piece, the self-development piece. That's a much more invested conversation. But I think a lot of times people just blame the system and go, I wish I could get one too, but I can't get one. That, the bucket's empty kind of behavior. And that doesn't teach anyone anything.
It's a real grown-ups. I'll let the grown-ups talk about it, and we'll get back to you style. Kat, I told you this story the other day when we were preparing for this. Is I probably suffered from that as a leader once, and I had a great performer, and he asked for a pay rise, and he deserved one. And I said, right, leave it with me. I'm on it. And so I fought for it, and probably didn't keep him up to date. Probably didn't know that I should be doing other things for him while we were waiting for that. And by the time it came through, it probably took me 6 months. And I got it back paid and everything, and I was so excited to tell him about it. And so then he said, oh my God, thanks so much, said all the right things. And then the day that all hit his bank account, he came to work the next day and he resigned. And I was like, oh my God, why did you do that to me? Selfish me.
To me,
yeah. And I said, come on, let's go out and have a walk and talk. What's going on? And he said, as I thought I could convince him to stay. And he said, Sam, I know you did everything. Thank you. He said, the business does not value me, and I have no choice. And I was like, what a bloody rock star. Whilst I hurt and I'm disappointed for my team and me, I was so proud of him to be able to maintain his boundaries like that. I mean, I can't wait to see the progression of his career, because if he's that strong and clear for that time in his career, where is he, in 10, 15 years' time? So it's really admirable.
Great. I love that story. I think that also comes to that, we've said it a few times, but really understanding what is it that you're looking for, and what does it mean to you, and what do you value from what might come as an outcome, whether that's pay or whether that's development or whether that's a horizontal shift or whether that's moving into a different space. What is it really that you're looking for? And is that really going to make you happy? Is it really going to give you what you need and what you want? Because you have to figure that out first. I think before you come into these conversations. And I feel sometimes, not everybody, but sometimes asking for money or a pay increase is, well, I don't really know, so I'm just going to go for more money. That'll fix everything.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah, and I think it's not that the reward and recognition. Sometimes it's just, hey, you did a
Yeah.
great job. And I'd like to, especially quiet people, you've got to be so careful that
Yes.
the doers are not in there just doing and you're going, oh, cool, that's my workhorse. I'll just let them, be the mushroom in the corner. It's like, no, 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 no. Come on out into the your kind of limelight, and let's have a conversation about what a bloody rock star you are. And so people understand, oh, that's what that person does. Oh, great. Because they're the ones who are, everybody says things like, oh, we don't know what we'd do without you. You're so great, blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not recognition. That's just a pat on the head.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Great leaders don't have to have all the answers and have all the cookies in the cookie jar, but they do need to invest the time into having a proper conversation, like a deep conversation that goes beyond the sort of surface level. I think also you said it, Sam, like this can't be the first time you're hearing these things. If it is, you're not doing a great job. It shouldn't be a surprise. You should be tapped into what's going on, the dynamics. There should be multiple conversations, and really, and then similarly, the person needs to be able to articulate what they really want, but often they do feel invisible. That's just the factor. So then the great leader needs to work with that person's dynamic and go, what's going on here? Because there's something other than just a pay and progression conversation. It's probably tapping into something bigger.
Yeah, I think anyone who's there listening to this and goes, ah, whether I'm a leader or whether I'm an employee or whatever
Mm,
the dynamic is for you, just have a think about what is something you can do that's a little bit different to
mm,
be heard. If you're feeling invisible, it's kind of like, okay, what can I do about that? At home, if you felt invisible, it really feels heavy on your chest. So when you say to
mm,
your partner, hey, I feel like things are not working here. Or if your kids are, coming home and dropping their school bag and dumping everything everywhere, not that that's a reality, uh,
mm,
that as soon as you turn it into a conversation, then things can change. So
mm,
if this is your reality and it's like, oh, I'd just rather just go away for the long weekend and just, it'll sort itself out. Guess what? It doesn't bloody sort itself out. So,
mm,
trying to go, oh God, it scares me, but I'm going to have that
mm,
conversation anyway. And it's not I think people go from, oh, I have to have that conversation. It's like, no, 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 you just have to have step one. What's one thing I
mm,
could say that would start a conversation? Hey, I don't know whether this is working.
mm,
Something that's,
mm,
or something's off. What do you think? Something that
mm,
opens up the conversation.
And
mm,
similarly for a leader, hey, I think there's an opportunity here for you. I think,
mm,
would this be something that you would like to try to do? Would you be, and sometimes people are really comfortable in the space that they're in and they do like sitting off to the
mm,
side and being really quiet, and that's fine. But I think you don't rely on that just because people aren't as confident to speak to you. I'm talking to the leaders that might be listening to this
mm,
now. Don't
mm,
rely on that, right? Because I
mm,
think, to your point, Sam, most people aren't in that space. They're just not confident enough to say what they really feel or what they want to ask for or what they want to go for. So as a leader, be that leader that engages in
mm,
that opportunity and provides some of that space first. Create the
mm,
space to have those conversations without worrying that, oh, now they're going to ask me for money. They might do,
mm,
but you're still going to have to be ready for that and think about all these other opportunities that you've got.
mm,
Yeah.
mm, mm. So we've talked about pay progression and fairness. How does the fairness come into everything we've discussed? Because obviously at an organizational level, you're wanting to look across the spectrum and go, we've got multiple individuals who have multiple, careers, needs, aspirations. You've got different decisions to be made. You're balancing the organizational context. How do we build in fairness or assess the fairness of a situation, taking all of that into account?
I think from my perspective, it doesn't matter what industry or context you're in.
Mm,
Transparency is one of the biggest keys to
mm,
that conversation. Not in a sense that I think you've got to be really careful as a leader not to tip it over the edge where all of a sudden it's your opportunity just to shut everything down. So there's transparency around maybe a system, process, structure. There's generally always a bit of grey space and room to move in most places. But I think, being really transparent about what sort of some of those limitations might be, and what then some of those opportunities might be to flex in and around those limitations. Or maybe there isn't, and maybe it's quite a hard line, and that's okay too. I think then you as a leader then need to be confident that if there have been some inconsistencies across the organisation, then this then turns into you talking to your leadership about that. Because if people around different organisations or teams have seen those inconsistencies play out, and they will, that people will talk very easily and very quickly. We have a few sayings that, don't worry about a comms plan, or don't worry about sort of external, internal branding. If you want to get something out, tell people not to say anything. It's a bit of a secret and it will spread like wildfire. I think you have to also be prepared as a leader that when you're having those conversations with your team members about those limitations, if they're coming back to you and saying, cool, but I know that Kat worked with Sam and this happened to them and that didn't follow the rules, great, I'm going to take that on notice. Let me talk about that to my leadership and other team members, and let's look at those inconsistencies. And there may be reason for that, and reasons that you can't explain. Either you haven't got that information at hand, or it's just not something you would disclose. And that's okay too. But you have to be prepared sometimes for those uncomfortable conversations as well.
Oh, I love that, Nick. I think you nailed it. They're very brave, as a leader. Then you're going to go and say, hey, there's an injustice here. What are we going to do about that to the people, here? That is something that would probably terrify people at the same time as really empower them, saying, well, I work in this company and I can affect change. So I think there's something, depending on the structure and the hierarchy of your business, I think this is a real intergenerational shift again. Of how are we doing business? Are we living the values that are, the nice stickers on the wall, or are we prepared to evolve and grow based on the beauty of having all these different styles and types of people that work in our organisation? And as a leader, that would make me think, oh, is this place where I want to be as well? It is those moments in time where something happens that it's like, oh, I can just, we'll let that go, or I can actually say, hey, everybody, this doesn't seem right. And so that's, again, how do you want to be as a leader, and how do you want to be remembered, or how do you want to look at yourself? I think that's the thing about, I think about the young people that I can influence. Am I living those values, or am I just going, oh, my values are good until the point where it's too hard? She's a challenge.
What about when it all goes wrong? Like, what does it look like when it all goes wrong? The person's asked, they're really not getting an answer they like. The leader's kind of gaffed the response. What happens? Because I love, Sam, that you gave an anecdote that I thought was going to be an all went wrong, and then he ends up being the hero, not the villain at the end of the story. But, you find this sort of like way to see it in a positive light. But what happens when these situations really implode, and how do we manage it better?
Yeah, in my experience, it's gone wrong when it's all very awkward and we've made it weird. So yeah, I was upset with that person in my team, and I say it the story now like, it was nothing. It was big. It was big, and I took it as a personal failure, and I felt really bad. And he left. When he left, it was sad. Everybody was sad to lose him from the team. So yeah, don't mean to paint the sunshine and rainbows version of it, but I think that a couple of things. One, when we have an isolated conversation and it goes badly, we often think, oh, well, I'll just pretend that didn't happen and I'll just leave that. Don't do that, because it's so important. I've been in negotiations where people have banged their hand on the desk and people have lost their minds and whatever. I mean, I'm a commercial negotiator, so remember that too. That is not normal behaviour. But even then, the next day, waking up and saying, hey, I lost my mind. what I was trying to say was X, Y, Z. I wasn't feeling like I was being heard. Can we revisit that conversation? So, making sure that you don't pretend it didn't happen and try and pretend it does. I mean, like, it's the same as any friend. If you have a disagreement, if you pretend it didn't happen, what happens is it costs you trust. And it's like,
Yes.
I can't trust that person to be able to, in a tough situation. And that sort of will erode your confidence, and it will erode your leadership capability as well. So being mindful, having robust discussion and debate is very good. However, how we perform is super important, and when it does go wrong, how we respond to that is even more important, because we are human beings and things will go wrong and we will be emotional. But carrying it on, picking it up is the key.
Mm.
I like that, I think probably comes back to a few points where we talked about, what are you looking for, what are you trying to be as a leader? People are nervous of the conversations because they want to be liked and want to be respected, but I think also it's acknowledging as a leader, it's not always going to go right for both parties or either party in that sort of a leader and team member context. That's okay. You can still part ways, whatever that might feel like or look like, and do that respectfully, and still do that with a level of care, and still do that with utmost integrity. I think there's sort of the things coming back to those. What are your values, and how are you going to really instill those throughout the process? And I find it's where there's inconsistency of information, where we haven't been transparent, where we've left that conversation to the absolute last moment.
Yep.
They're those examples of when it goes wrong. For me, that's already started off on the wrong foot. And we've all talked about that during this session so far, but it's already wrong when there's sort of the context that you come into. If you've started those conversations early, if you've been part of the process throughout time, that you've had that relationship between leader and team member, if you've tried to find solutions and they haven't quite worked, or you've explored different things, I mean, it's all, it's easier said than done, I think, once it happens. But as long as you hold true to those values, then people might not like the outcome, but they might be able to accept, respect that outcome. So I think there's sort of different ways in terms of how you would interpret it going wrong.
I think just going to put one thing to that. I think it's interesting when you said that, we might not like the outcome. And, leading with that, I have done X, Y, Z. We built a case study. We built a plan. Unfortunately, circumstances have changed. Even 6 weeks ago when we started talking about this to today, everything's changed. So being really honest and saying, you are not going to like this because I don't like it either. But this is what we're faced with. So is there any hope? Is there any chance that something else could matter? Or we can take another path, or we're a bit time delayed, or whatever it is? Keeping that shared problem means that I feel like, okay, you've got my back. And no, I don't like it. And maybe I will start looking for something else, or maybe, blah, 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 whatever my options may be. But rather than just going, look, I tried. It's that whole thing you said, Kat, before about, I'm sort of hiding behind a little bit of the policy and the process. It's like, well, I did the best I could. And it's like those little catchphrases makes me want to punch you in the face. So let's not use those sorts of things. Let's be real.
Because I think
Violence
it goes.
is never the answer.
I know, sorry.
Maybe it's time to wrap up. Because I think it goes to the quality of the roles that people get put into, isn't it? It's like you can have this sort of very almost paternalistic an asker and a giver role, which that just feels icky in a workplace context. You can also have this sort of good guy, bad guy. That's not going to like get you anywhere if your management style is to just constantly blame the bean counters at the top, or HR, or whoever you blame. But what you've talked about is this real, like, talking to people as an adult with this sense of maturity and coaching and honesty and transparency, and And it's, let's face it, the people in workplaces these days, they're very skilled, they're very experienced, they're very capable, they're intelligent. We're not talking to people who can't understand an honest, robust conversation. And I think if I bring this, sort of to a sort of summary point, I think that's what we've talked about is have these conversations that are well informed, well thought through, fluent on both sides of the table, know what you really want, be prepared to articulate it. It might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but you've got something to say, so you've got to figure out how you're going to say it in a way that doesn't feel demeaning or demoralizing, but it also is clear and crisp. But then on the other side, the manager needs to be able to respond with transparency is the big word that I've heard, with clarity, with a coaching mindset, not just a yes, no, once a year. We've had that conversation. I'll see you next June. Thanks for coming. That sort of a mindset.
100%.
One closing tip that you'd give people out there listening and thinking about, well, where does that leave me today? Like you've just told me the world's complicated and scary and risky, but I deserve a lot more than I'm getting. One final tip.
For me, it's just about human connection. It might not necessarily be happy and comfortable and always great, but connect with people, talk with people, connect with them, understand as much as you can, whether you're in a team, whether you're a leader, whatever your relationship is. Human connection is the biggest driver to sort of the best possible outcome.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that you spend so much time with the people you work with. They know you so well. And if you're lucky, you work in a team, in a business that is awesome. And so instead of waiting till it's not, actually going, you know what, I'm going to be the keeper of my destiny, and the people who I care about that are around me, I'd really like them to help me go to wherever I end up going to. So really having that conversation and airing these things. I think that it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be just overwhelming. It should be a little step every day or every little while that's like, okay, cool, I feel like, okay, that was a bit weird the first time, but now that's how I do what I do. So yeah, opening the conversation.
Thank you, Nick and Sam, for bringing your wisdom and insights to this conversation. I'm sure that everyone will benefit from it, whether they are working in an organisation, a manager, a very senior leader. They're all balancing a number of different variables, but we're all wanting the same sort of outcomes at the end of the day, which is that sense of well-being in the workplace. Thank you very much. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll see you again.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Kat.